thank you, Adrian, for convening us here today. It's really a great pleasure and opportunity for us all, I think, and we hope we can convince you to repeat this as soon as possible. So I took the role of the hired assassin here, and I have to talk about the risks and challenges, but please keep in mind, my group and I have been doing this for 15 years ourselves. We love the field, and if you are looking for cooperations, you can still talk to us, even if I talk against this now. And also there's I think 100,000 different risks to consider, and I will focus on 7 of them, and among those I will not talk about are these, like how do I obtain the data at all, how do I get them interoperable, what are the privacy and security challenges, and so on. I will not be talking about this. So I think before I start talking about the risks, it's good to reconsider why we are meeting here at all, because artificial intelligence and neural networks have been around since the 1940s. So this is not really new. So why all the hype? And I think it really started with the great successes that made it into the public attention and press of artificial intelligence in things we did not consider machines being able to do for quite a long time. This was beating us at chess and Go. And I don't want to go into all the details of these games, but as you can see in Go, after quite a short time, you can have 200 moves in the game, and this allows you 10 to the exponent of 170 possible combinations of moves for an average game of Go. So this is really an astronomical number. If you compare it to the age of the universe, this is 1.4 times 10 to the 9, and we could not, if we had a network of all computers in the world to calculate these combinations, they would take longer than our universe exists to calculate this. But still, machines beat us at this game without really doing all the math of calculating every possible moves. And well, Deep Blue, there was some people say they may have cheated in beating Kasparov back in the 1990s, because they somehow reconfigured the computer and the code was gone after the game, and it was never really tested. But I think it's quite certain that AlphaGo really beat a lot of different Chinese grandmasters and world champions in the game of Go later on. And how did they do that? Basically, they used a lot, some refined technologies with existing technologies. And I think one very important part of AlphaGo was to use reinforcement learning, which basically meant that the computer played against little iterations of itself, lots of games, and re-optimized by simulation. So you have seen some of these statements already today. So in the aftermath, everyone said, wow, yeah, so AlphaGo's victory will translate into healthcare. And sorry for the German slides, but we don't want to make doctors unemployed. That's very kind. And may I introduce myself, your doctor, the robot. And actually, I think we have made great progress in many areas using machine learning since then. And we already had a lot of great examples of such studies today, so I won't dwell deeper into this. So I come to my first challenge. If AlphaGo was so successful by simulating, I see the problem that we cannot really simulate human outcomes, but we need data. We need reliable data to train our artificial intelligence. Now, this is still quite possible. For example, if I have a photograph of a petri dish and I look at colonies, because later on I have a very high quality result of what was growing on that agar, and then I can use that to train a network that looks at the image of my petri dish to identify that culture early on. But if you have like an actual disease which is complex and you have a sick patient, and now I want to have something that helps me treat invasive pulmonary aspergillosis, which is rare but very deadly, needs to be recognized early. It would be a great application for a good AI, I think. But the thing is, we don't have a lot of cases per year per hospital. And it's really difficult to diagnose. Usually, if the patient survives, we do not make the diagnosis. We see that from the abduction of the patient when he has died as a cause of, by that disease. So, and now if you look at an average patient file, you have really a lot of data points to describe the background of the patient. You have on one inpatient day, if you consider everything that is recorded, every medication that is prescribed, every lab value that comes to the system, all the different consultations and so on, you have lots of data points per additional day, which amounts to quite a lot of data points you have in your average electronic health record already. And that is not by far not everything there is to record. And each of these data points has lots of different degrees of freedom, because in this table, one data point would be a prescription of a drug, but you can use lots of different drugs. And this gives you still much more different combinations that are possible compared to a Go game, and you all only have 10,000 data sets available and you can simulate the outcome. So I think this will be a difficult task to tackle. Now the second problem we are facing is that AI doesn't have a sense of what is right or wrong. And we can ask a question and you will receive some answer that is defined by the algorithm or by how we trained the algorithm. As an example, so this is my son Edgar 3 years ago when he was barely 1 year old, and he couldn't really talk, but he could very clearly say that this animal up here is a gagak, yeah, which is not a word, but I think he meant chicken. Yeah. You could also give Edgar this sketch, and he would still say it's a gagak, and also this is clearly a gagak, while this is an enter, a duck. Yeah. So not even 1 year old, and he was able to make this distinction. Now, if we give this chicken to the currently most sophisticated publicly available imaging network, you can, if you don't know it, it's quite fun, you can click this button and upload a picture, and you will actually look for similar pictures, and Google will actually give you more gagaks, which is good. But you don't have to scroll very far down to find this guy. And this is what concerns me. Because in the end, you know, the machine here doesn't really care if it's a chicken. It cares for white pixels over green pixels. And maybe here the red, that's why he liked this one the most. But still, this was a reasonable alternative for him. And I think Edgar would not have been fooled here. So, and this is really how we train our algorithms. Currently, we think we have this nice data lake here with all the different information from different areas of treatment, and we give it to an algorithm. We know the outcome, good outcome here, bad outcome there. For example, in this case, we know it is a good outcome. Now we train the algorithm, and it says, I think it's really a good outcome, 92% chance, and we say, good bot, do this more often, and I will, and you make me happy. But the thing is, when we actually treat a patient, it's much more complicated, and this is just part of the decision-making process that we're looking at. And when you are seeing a patient, you really have to consider a lot of different things. There is no, in many cases, there's no such thing as a good outcome or a bad outcome. I have to look at my patient and decide, is it a priority for this patient to become healthy, or is it a priority to spend time at home? Think of palliative care, think of oncology patients who have spent a lot of time in the hospital. I will sometimes do a somewhat less effective treatment and decide to use an oral treatment if my patient must stay at home. On the other hand, if I know my patient lives very far away from the hospital, like somewhere in a rural area, 50 kilometers to the next hospital, he's living alone, he's maybe old, I will sometimes hospitalize him and give him IV treatment, just because I'm not sure if he has the compliance and if he's safe at home, although this may not be according to guidelines. And actually, I may just give him the IV treatment because I know that the insurance company will not reimburse me for treating a patient in the hospital with oral drugs. So I have to give him something IV. Yeah? So there's really a lot of mad reasoning behind treating patients, and you also maybe some insurance companies will pay for one treatment or not. You have to consider other factors, like you have to weigh short-term effectiveness against long-term effectiveness. It doesn't help you if you have a very effective treatment, if it's really highly toxic, or if you develop cancer 10 years later because you had a too strong treatment. So you have really a lot of things to weigh in when you plan your treatment. And you also have to consider a lot of things when you assess whether your treatment was successful, because we're not only looking at survival, we're also looking at quality of life aspects, at toxicity, at the cost. If you have equally effective measures, you might actually choose cost. I can give every patient with every infection meropenem, and I will cause a lot of resistances. I will cause a lot of additional costs, although it is probably the most effective treatment against many bacterial diseases. So what do we train our artificial intelligence to do actually in our patients? The third challenge, and this is really a nice one, I think. I think we have to understand what we are doing. That's easy with maybe support vector machines and random forests, but when you go to deep networks, it's really difficult to understand. It gets difficult to understand how our AI has decided for a treatment or not. And so this is a paper by Lapushkin and Müller that was recently published, and he developed an algorithm that shows how a neural network decides in image recognition. And he noticed that with one of his AIs that he was assessing with his new algorithm, that strangely the AI highlighted this area as a decision point, and this was actually a tag that reads Pferdefotoarchiv, so horse photo archive. Yeah? And you can see there's a horse on here. So he had the suspicion that actually the AI was not able to recognize horses, but instead read the tag on the photo. So and you can see here's a sports car, and the AI didn't recognize anything. And what Müller did is he copied this tag on that photo, and now this is a horse, and this is the sports car. Yeah. So, or this is not a horse. So to be fair, yeah. And he looked at and he asked for researchers to send in their AIs and tested them. And 50% of the AIs used information that did not qualify at all in the sense that a human would understand this. So for example, this AI actually looked at barriers to identify horses. It wasn't able to identify horses, but it saw stuff that is associated with horses to suspect that a horse could be on the picture. And then there was others that also looked at tags. There were others that looked at metadata of the photos or the name of the file. And he called this smart Hans phenomenon, because smart Hans is a horse that actually lived in the late 19th century and had a keeper that was called Wilhelm von Osten, and he claimed that his horse was able to count. And so this was a large sensation where many people attended and watched how the horse counted on a board. And so if here was the number of 84, for example, and then it slapped the board for 84 times, that everyone was amazed. And there was a research group led by Karl Stumpf from the Prussian Academy of Science was sent over to analyze this very intelligent horse. And actually the first time they left and acknowledged, okay, this horse can really count. We did a lot of tests, and this horse can count. If you give it a number and tell it a number, it can really make the correct number. And it was a student of his that during a second visit discovered that the horse was very good at looking at people's faces. And if the audience was aware of the correct number, then the horse stopped at the same moment that the people were relieved. And but if the audience was unaware of that number, the host was not able to count. So look out for smart Hanses in your AI. Yeah. And actually, we created a smart Hans ourselves. So this is a data set where we did something comparable to Carol, not as sophisticated as her, but we also try prediction in febrile neutropenia patients because it's a good population to observe infectious events. They had very high risk of developing infections, and we did a random forest model with some 200 features and tried to predict poor outcomes for the patients. And the parameter our model liked the most was albumin. Now, albumin is a protein that is found in the human blood, and it's actually associated, a low albumin level is actually associated with multimorbidity and terminal cancer. So we thought, yeah, at first glance, we thought, wow, yeah, okay, somehow we knew that before, that people with a low albumin level are in bad shape. But it's actually quite interesting to see that this is the most predictive feature of a poor outcome of an infection. It's maybe something we should consider more in the future. Then a bit later, we realized that albumin is not determined on our normal ward, but only on the intensive care unit because it's expensive to assess. So basically, this was just a surrogate of people who were moved to the ICU within the first 3 days of their infection. So this is just, smart Hans in action. Okay, challenge 4. Now, we say, I think we need to be fair when we assess the effectiveness of an artificial intelligence, because as doctors, we currently do not always do what we personally think is best. We have been trained to follow evidence-based medicine. We have been trained to follow guidelines. And for example, if I have even if I have the gut feeling that a patient has one bacteria or not, and I would say, I'm really very sure this is not Pseudomonas, let's use a very simple small spectrum drug, then probably my wife, as here, would say, yeah, you're so funny, you can't do that, that's not safe for the patient, it's not safe legally, you will get a very bad forensic examination, something goes wrong, we have to use pip/tazo, the guideline says that. Yeah? And of course, our AI might say, yeah, it's not Pseudomonas. And if we would now just compare the stupid doctor using pip/tazo and exceeding the needed spectrum with the knowledge that we have later on during the treatment, and compare this to the assessment of the AI, we would look very badly. So if you do this comparison, you have to make sure that either you compare the algorithm to the best educated guess of the doctor and really say what would you have expected to be the outcome and what would have been your advice if you hadn't had to follow guidelines, or you would have to test the algorithm against existing guidelines and really do a clinical trial showing the superiority against the knowledge that we have from previous clinical trials. And I mean, this thing here has a long history, how we approve drugs for our markets, because there have been problems and there have been patients who have been poorly treated and poorly advised until we came up with a very rigorous system of testing drugs before we apply them to our patient. And I can tell you, it's many times it's frustrating if you know there are new drugs around and you want to use them, but you can't because you still have to wait for the approval, maybe sometimes multiple years. But as I said, there are risks connected with just putting things on the market just because we can do them. And I think we have to learn how to apply this to self-optimizing, self-learning AI algorithms that are intended to keep changing. And because I think if tomorrow your doctor would say, I chemically changed this approved drug and I put some acid here and some stuff there, but I think it's still very good, I think you would become very skeptical of that doctor and maybe ask for the established drug. Yeah? And we all, everyone who has ever coded knows how easy it is to make severe mistakes. And this is not the future. This is actually in place now. There are first systems that really look at the health record and then make suggestions. What is the diagnosis, and then also tell you which pathogen is most prevalent for that diagnosis in your hospital, and even suggests an antibiotic. And this is a closed shop. You have no idea how that algorithm works, how they made that prediction, and on what data that relies. And it's completely unknown who is to blame if something goes wrong by following such a prediction. Okay, challenge 5. I think most algorithms currently are looking for overcorrectness, because many are trained for the area under the receiver operating characteristic curve, or for correctness, or for sensitivity or specificity, and this means that especially for rare diseases are completely dropped. So this is AIDA. I think it's only available in Germany. It's a very sophisticated app that allows you to document symptoms. They won a lot of prizes. It's an AI startup in Berlin, and you can document your systems as a patient or a doctor. And so I documented here a very severe case of a patient who has had deteriorating symptoms within 1 week with coughing blood, high fever, and shortness of breath, and clearly in a very bad shape. And the output was, yeah, I think it's pneumonia. And on the one hand, I think that's okay, because he advised you to go to the doctor, and pneumonia is a severe disease. But I mean, there's like tuberculosis or lung cancer and so on. There would have been many different options, and they were not. They were all not detected by this. Okay, so challenge 6, data sets. There's so much to say about data sets, and I think some of the others today have already touched this issue. And just to give you an example of how volatile the whole situation is, I recently, I think it's 3 years ago now, we received the question to identify patients for a clinical trial, so we are in charge of the translational platform HIV, which is a large cohort with 25 sites in Germany, where we collect data on HIV-positive patients. And the simple question was, please give us all newly admitted treatment naive HIV-positive patients who have been observed for at least 5 years. So it seems very simple. But when you look at the small parts of this question, you quickly come up with a lot of different data sources that you need to consider to really test for all of these questions. So you have 8 distinct systems you have to query. And we came up with a number of 247 eligible patients for Cologne. Now, just as a simulation, if we would not have considered the anamnesis, which is a free text where patients were asked whether they had received antiretroviral treatment at any point in their previous history, if we would just have forgotten to consider this, we would have turned up with 340 patients, half of whom would not match the inclusion criteria of this study. So, of course, for this clinical study, this would have been rechecked. But if this was an epidemiologic study, we would have taken this data set into the analysis. And yeah, now 1/3 of the whole data set is not of the group we want to look at and of the group that we will report about. So it's it's very difficult to define your data set from a real life population. Okay, now last challenge. We are facing a new medical device regulation in Germany. It became a law in 2017. It will go into action this May, and it has this very toxic sentence that software intended to provide information which is used to take decisions with diagnosis or therapeutic purposes, which is really a very, very wide definition. This is actually PubMed. It is classified as a Class 2A medical device. Now it gets even more interesting, except if such decisions have an impact that may cause death, then it's Class 3, or serious deterioration of health, and then that is Class 2B. Now, even an ointment for a toe disease can cause allergic shock and kill you. So if you're very unlucky. So it will be very interesting to see how they classify our products in the end, because Class 3 is basically the same as a fully automated heart transplantation robot that works unattendedly. And I keep asking people. We are currently working on an application in this field, and we had 3 lawyers who couldn't help us. The German Ministry for medical devices and drugs couldn't really help us. They sent us to the TÜV, and the TÜV said they don't advise on these things. We should file our records and then see what happens. And it's really, really, and nobody knows how this law will actually be read by judges when we're getting active. So this will be a major issue for many of us working in this field. So as a conclusion, I think when we look at the tree of AI decision making and the fruits that it has, I think we have some really low-hanging fruits. And this is single outcome inference, and I mean, we just want to know, will he respond? We just want to know what is this colony here? What is this, what I see under my microscope? So one clearly defined question, lots of data, good algorithm, that will work. Or simple pattern recognition, for example, outbreak detection, sepsis, type of sepsis, is it sepsis or not? I think we are in a very good position to have such highly specialized inference systems, and I think there are a lot of applications already going on with insulin dosing, warfarin dosing, and so on, and this is really working well. And actually, a lot of this is happening already, so if you're considering entering this field, really check that there's not like 20 others already doing that. Then there's high-hanging fruits, and this is like complete treatment decisions or complete disease management, diagnostic pathways. So basically the idea, let's get rid of the physicians and let the machine do it. And it could be possible at some point. I think currently we're lacking a lot of the data that we need to make these assessments. But on the other hand, in the past 30 years, we improved our weather prediction from 70% correctness to 90% correctness within 1 day. And after 1 week, we are still down to tossing a coin, basically, when trying to predict the weather. So I'm not sure if we will ever get there, but I think it is still a long, long way to go. And so I really would try to avoid this hype. It is going on. I was recently with the Federal Ministry of Education and Research in an advisory board, and one of really Germany's most established medical informatics professors said, in 5 years we won't have projects anymore in science. We will just have the AI do it for us. And the room was silent after that. But there was also nobody who stood up and said, no, I don't think so. Okay, so I think, and this is, I think, a multi-billion-dollar project, because you have to include many, many different data sources and build machines that give you new sources that we didn't have yet. So, and I think for me the next step would be to do something along these lines with individual risk management and plausibility checks, patient safety checks, which actually combine multiple of these inference mechanisms into one platform, so I can simulate a treatment decision and ask, okay, will this harm the liver? Will this harm the kidney? Will this make the patient healthy? Will this let the patient allow to stay at home, and so on? And use many different systems, maybe from different vendors at different sites, and include them into one dashboard, one platform. And I think this could be a plausible next step from where we are currently at this moment. Thank you for your attention.